had to stop calling it particles because they went up to the level of electrons and neutrons and protons. But then beyond that, the behavior of these so-called particles started changing in such a weird way that they could change into energy, they could change into particles, one or the other, so they stopped calling particles. Now they call them quanta. And that's how the word quantum physics came. And this is not an easy matter. It's not a fiction. It's not something out of the comic books. It's not a fantasy. It is a reality. Because this is what makes us. It makes the whole world. It makes the whole universe. So whatever the quantum physicists are saying, we have to take it seriously. It's not that we can push it away and still keep on living our normal life. So a new thinking or new awareness of the life has to start coming up. And new realization has to start setting in our life. So now the language of the scientists and Eastern mysticists, all the mystics that used to exist, all the scientific sadhus and mahatmas, their language and the scientific language now basically coming to the same language. Scientists are saying the same thing what our Eastern mysticists had been saying it for thousands of years. And now they're coming with the full force of their observations. Now it's not a hollow, blind faith anymore. So far, our Eastern mysticists that had achieved these results with their experiments in meditation, but the only way for them to tell us that either you do it yourself or you believe what we say. If you're not ready to do those experiments, you believe it. So in a way, they were not wrong saying that, believe me, that is God. If you cannot do an experiment yourself, then you accept it. Because there is no other way we can show it to you. There were no sophisticated instruments. There were no electrical microscope, electron microscope, nothing like that available to instruments to detect at such a level that they could come out and say, okay, this, and this is what it is. And now they themselves are so befuddled themselves, the scientifics, that they are saying that, believe us, that's what it is. So quantum physicists we cannot neglect, even though they are doing all these things, because this is what makes the whole world. It makes you and me. It makes us, everybody around us. The whole experiences that we're going through ultimately is broken down to at a quanta level, made out of quantums, right? So the disturbances in the energy field generates the matter. And just the way it generates the matter, it takes it back also. The first inspiration we always talked about is the book by Capra, K-A-P-R-A. He was a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel Prize in physics, and he wrote the book Tao of Physics. It was a very fascinating book, and he worked on the linear accelerator, which goes on several hundred miles, 200, 300 miles, and then they fire an atom, atom A going in one direction, atom B going in the another direction, and finally they bang atom A to the atom B. Now our Newtonian concepts, which are continuously being replaced by the quantum concepts, but our Newtonian mind is still not coming out of the rigidity of the world, right? So you would think that mass of A plus mass of B, when it bangs, it creates a lot of subatomic particles. Now these subatomic particles can be measured, can be picturized, you can exactly weigh them, you can find out how much weight it is, and you can see the progress. How long do they live for? They are created, they exist from 2 seconds to 20 seconds to 2 minutes to 20 minutes to 2 hours. Some of them disappear, some of them don't disappear, but all the addition of all the subatomic particles should add up to particle A plus particle B. But it's not. It doesn't. He showed that it's always more. What happened? Where did those extra particles come from? If we believed that it was only particle A and particle B and everything else is useless junk, that empty space has no value, what happened? So time and time again, these experiments have been conducted and it has become scientific fact. In fact, this book was written in 1980s. So we are lagging behind, but it's still after 30 years, our mentality is hooked on the Newtonian physics, that the empty space that we call empty space is the field of energy. When the energy gets agitated, it comes into existence. And that existence is what we call some of the subatomic particles, which has a fixed lifespan. It has a shape, it has a size. It comes into our perceptive range. Remember the dimmer, from no light that we call darkness to the full light that we call well-lit room, but the slider switch is, so wherever, somewhere in between, our senses starts perceiving it. So it comes to the field of perception, the energy becomes a particle. And at some point, some of the particles, they live for 20 seconds, 2 hours, and they disappear. And then all of a sudden there is a void again. So these experiments have showed that energy converts into matter. E equal to mc square. And then we talked about the famous Young's double slit experiment that we talked about so many times, that if you throw particles like bullets, and if you have a single slit, at the other end, if you have a screen, it will show a single slit. There is nothing more than that, because particles which are blocked by the rest of the board is going to be blocked. All the one which can penetrate through the empty slot is going to be showing a vertical line. If you put two slits, again, you go to the screen, there will be two slits, because these are particles. They don't have room to spread across, scatter, because they are not particles. They have a momentum, they have a trajectory, and they have a force which is behind it, allows them to travel in certain direction and then stop at the screen level. So particles will create double slits. Now the same experiment, if you lower the slit into the water and let the water go through that. Now water is like an energy. Water has a capacity to spread. In fact, if you have one slit and you let the water flow, it will have like a convex appearance. The waves will travel, and if you go to the another screen where it ultimately reaches, it creates a fuzzy but a single slit, because there is only one slit but a wide spectrum. But then if you put two slits, now we have two sources of water going through, and both of them having convex waves, but now they're going beyond their slit range, because it's going to be convex. There's going to be interactions between the two waves coming from two different slits. So there is going to be permutation, combination, and there will be multiple lines wherever the peak of that wave, one from the other, where it becomes augmented, it creates a slit. Where it gets nullified, it does not. So it will be several lines. So that is called convergence pattern. So it shows that water is like energy. And the light, theoretically, if we create, like bullets are particles, right? So the next phase, somebody wanted to, Young experimented with the light, with the presumption at that time that light is made out of electrons, which are particles. That was the belief at that time. So he figured that if I send it through the one slit, it will be a single appearance, and it did. But the problem came when the two slits were put in. Now, all of a sudden, he saw the convergence pattern. Now, if the light was particles, it was not supposed to spread like waves, but it did. And they had multiple lines. So, when multiple two slits were put in, light behaved like energy. And when the single slit was there, it behaved like particles. Also, another problem came later on. If a person is observing the experiment, light will behave like particles. If you walk away and let the thing be alone, it behaves like waves. Then you see convergence. What happened? Observer's existence at the time of experiment changed the results. Why? As if the light had a way of knowing that Deepak is looking at me. Was almost conscious. There was a consciousness at that level, automatically, presuming that how come the results can be changed just by your being there. So all of a sudden, at the quantum level, your objectivity falls apart. It becomes a subjective experience. That if you are there, results are different. If you are not there, results are different. And then there are a lot of modifications of this double slit experiment that we talked about also in the past. That if you let the light travel beyond the two slits and let it travel at such a certain distance and let it span little time, and mind well, the light travels at 186,000 miles per second, so it's not easy to carry out this experiment. But they did, and they allowed the light to have some time, right? I mean, they had atomic clocks measuring at microseconds and everything. So they let the light come out and then decided to put the filter at the end. If they put the filter later, it behaved like particles. Even after light had left the double slit, and if you being there was supposed to behave like particle, in fact, they said we will be absent from the experiment, but we decided to put the filter later, it turned like a particle. As if light knew that somebody was going to watch this experiment. Now talk about spookiness. I'm telling you, quantum physics is totally different ballgame. So all of a sudden the concepts of scientists were falling apart. And in fact, the uncertainty became the number one principle. Uncertainty, that where you cannot predict what's going to happen, uncertainty is the most basic principle of quantum physics. Whereas 300, 500 years of Newtonian physics had given us with certainty which planet with which in which orbit at such and such date in such and such predictable future where that planet or where that thing would be. It was so much certainty. In fact, that's what I said, the rocket ships and all can travel. Even they have landed rocket ships on comets, on asteroids. I mean, they are like small objects with such a precision, but that precision is absent in quantum physics. So things are becoming very interesting. So now all of a sudden we are going into the journey of unknown.
Uncertainty is really create new possibilities.
Exactly. Right.
Otherwise,
So
nothing is possible otherwise. Yeah.
So they say that some experiments showed that light is wave-like, and some showed that it was a particle. If you want to show that light is a wave, or you want to show that light is a particle, it's up to you which experiment you want to choose. So again, you are the chooser, you are the creator of a belief that light is particle or light. So it comes back to choices. Now the choice is yours. What do you want to, God is saying that, what do you want today? It's like, you want to be a particle? Okay, I'll do that. You want it to look like a wave? I'll do that too. Einstein had a famous quote. He said that looking at the consciousness is like looking, somebody is trying to look at a watch. The watch is tightly sealed. He has no way of knowing what is the mechanism operating the watch. So he's going to have his own theory. He will think about it, think about it, think about it, and he will have a firm belief that this is how the watch operates. And yet, deep inside in his mind, he knows that is not necessarily the only mechanism, because he has no proof. He has not been able to open the watch, and he doesn't know the truth, and he knows that it is only his theory, and he knows deep inside that someone else has equally logical, equally believable theory about the watch mechanism, and someday, somewhere along the line, maybe the watch will be opened up and we will know the exact mechanism of how the watch is operating, but by that time, whether his own theory will compare with the reality or not, and at that point, he would say he doesn't care. The journey itself was so wonderful to trying to find the fact. If the fact is ever found, it's like scientifically that has been proven that by the time you find the mechanism, would it really matter of such a beautiful, complex watch operating in front of you, giving you beautiful experiences, and if you do really find out, would it really matter what your belief was, or his belief was, or your belief was? No, it would not matter. And this is exactly our rishis have been saying. It's like two salt dolls. They wanted to measure the depth of the ocean. They went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And they could not measure the depth. They got lost. In fact, the observer merged with the observed, the entity. You merge. At that point, you don't exist. So your beliefs don't exist. Your ideas do not matter. The mind does not exist. You just become one with the reality. That is the dance of life. You dissolve yourself. So that's what Einstein said. Einstein was the knower of energy. He knew that we will never be able to solve the riddle of life. But we will be able to merge ourselves with the riddle. Now, if Einstein with that IQ, what are we? And we trying to solve everything in life.
You never know.
Yes, we'll see. Famous last words. So, according to quantum physics, there is nothing like objectivity. It's all subjective. So, all of a sudden we are realizing that physics is becoming a branch of psychology. With what kind of attitude you look at the experiments, even the physics experiments, alters the results. Or vice versa. Psychology has become a part of physics. Now, so far, it was never like that. There were two different branches. So all of a sudden, meditation is becoming a way of knowing the structure of consciousness. Now, structure is a physical word. Consciousness is the spiritual world, but now the boundaries are getting blurred. So,
Actually, Shrenik Bhai, before all the sciences started, they were all called philosophy.
right,
So
agree.
that's how the psychology has taken over everything.
Right, but the only problem was that it was being taken advantage of. These facts were known by Krishna, facts were known by Jesus, but then later on came so-called religions which put you in a totally wrong direction and saying that this is what it is, and then
They were not knowing, but they discovered through their own existence.
Agreed. But the people who were followers, they didn't
couldn't
know.
get it yet.
The followers were not achieved or enlightened people. So for them, again, conversion into material aspect was more of a priority than actually knowing the truth. They did not wanted to take the dive into the ocean.
Comfort.
Yes. So it is becoming kind of weird. And again, having a scientific approach to the whole yoga and the spirituality would totally change your outlook. So that's the main crux of the talk that we have started, is from science to samadhi. So